pocket only thing.
Yep. All right. Now this is likely to be the shortest talk of this whole sub-series. In fact, it might be the shortest talk overall. And there's a reason for that, and it's because I feel uneasy if I don't feel that my understanding is adequate to the topic. And the only reason that I'm talking about this topic at all is because it is exceedingly important. One of the most important first principles. Hi, Heidi. What I understand about the principle, I'm sure of. But there is ever so much more about the principle that I am not knowledgeable about, and that makes me a little bit uneasy. Anything that I have not experienced, I'm not wanting to talk much about. This is one of those talks. It is trying to share what I can share and hope that it sparks something in you, and then if it sparks something in you, I'll get feedback from you. And it'll probably work in such a way that as soon as I give what I have to offer, the more understanding will follow after it. First, we have to do a little recapitulation, but soon recapitulations will be too much. This is a sub-series of talks on mysticism, the first sub-series. And what we're trying to do before going into mysticism in full is we're trying to understand the basic first principles. And we're trying to imbue ourselves with first principles so that they're constantly in our consciousness and we can understand and look for them. We're doing this because we all want to have mystical experience. We all want to experience the universal spirit. Right now we may not have dazzling mystical experiences, but we do all have intuitions. And those intuitions are direct spiritual experiences in that by following them up in ourselves, we can come to greater experience. Another reason we're looking at these first principles is we want to have a solid philosophical foundation. Because otherwise what happens is we get carried away by psychic phenomena or trendy philosophies and things like that, and we're not really based in sound knowledge. The way we're doing this is we're trying to introduce first principles through maxims and sayings and scriptures and things like that, which are a shorthand for one, and they are mnemonic to help us recall them when we encounter things in our lives. So the first principle we talked about was unity. Unless we can find unity in anything and everything, we probably can't know anything or everything. Unity is. When we have an intuitive experience, we are at one with what we understand. And so we introduced that first principle of unity through an old spiritual maxim called everything is in everything. Most importantly, everything is in us. We tried to go beyond that next because we realized that even though everything shares a common unity, or we couldn't know it, we realize that in the world that we live, and even in the world where we think and emote, diversity seems much more prevalent than unity. In fact, there is a principle, and we may even look into it, that unity becomes itself or sustains itself through diversity, but that's something else. So we asked ourselves next, why, if unity is all important, is there so much diversity? And we tried to get at this through a common mystical experience that everyone has had. And that experience is when you come to know something by intuition or by reason or by working it through an experience, when you come to know something, and that same moment of knowing, you realize also how much you do not know. There are a lot of things that are unknown, and that in the pursuit of knowledge, one discovers the unknown in the same way, at that same moment. We laboriously tried to ponder the subtleties of all of that, but we came to understand the subject-object relationship and the relationship of the object to everything that isn't the object in a simple way. And we saw that in diversity, that there is difference. And it's almost as if the unity isn't a stale unity, it's a very fresh, always new unity. When you have an intuition, even if it's an intuition about something you've known before, that in that intuition it's new. It's always brand new, and part of the reason for that novelty is because of diversity, by seeing it from a different point of view. So we came to see that knowledge and creation come about because of division and diversity. We couldn't find a maxim to state that, so we made up our own, and we said that all creation and knowledge are born in dualism and indifference.
You need two words, not indifference.
Well, not indifference, but two different words, in and difference. And we also related it a little bit to the common folk statement, the more you know, the more you don't know. In our most recent meeting, we followed up the whole idea of division and dualism and difference a little further. We did this because we're seeking knowledge. And this is a principle of coming to knowledge. We noted that for knowledge, for there to be a difference, it doesn't have to be symmetric. It doesn't have to divide the cosmos into halves, so to speak. Simple difference produces simple knowledge. We didn't note at that time, but we should have, that the differences or the divisions or the knowledge occurs in co-potentials. The co-potentials are time and space. So that when something new is created, it is created in these two co-potentials. But if there is a difference in time, or if there is a difference in place, there is change. And so last time we spoke about knowledge coming through change. Change means action, either physical action or implied transcendent spiritual action. And so last time we talked about what is called classically the principle of change. or the principle of action. We used a very classic maxim that comes from Judeo-Christian scripture, and it's one that everybody has known. It is, as ye sow, so shall ye reap. We didn't take the quote any further than that because that was enough. We're trying to get at an understanding that through any action of any kind, there's something automatically comes back to you anytime you put forth an action. We did not look at the ethics of this, as in what goes around comes around, or anything like that. We didn't want to do that because that went too far into the direction of moral and ethical evolution. And we'll have an entire series of talks on that at some time. We just wanted to get at the principle itself. And in order to get at it, we looked at specialized versions of the principle of as ye sow, so shall ye speak, that weren't perfect manifestations of it, but each of them gave us a little bit of a better understanding. One of those manifestations is cause and effect, where usually the consciousness is more on the cause, people of cause. The other way we looked at it was in the principle of cause and consequence, which is a moral principle. Finally, we went back to physics again, only this time we did not go for cause and consequence. We took the physics principle that probably describes this on any level in ways that physicists would no doubt cringe about it. And we said that this is manifest in what we call action and reaction. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And the equality is not only in force, it is in character as much as it is in the amplitude of the experience. All right, that's as far as we've gone in the first three talks. Obviously, this recap is very different than the original presentation was, and that's by intention, because every time we look at a first principle from a different point of view, or explain it in a different way, or refer to it in different circumstances, we see a different side to it. The truth is not the way some people of strict religions, they want the same truth to be the same all the time, not realizing that there are many sides to the truth. It is one truth, but there are different sides to it. We also want to be able to utilize these principles. And we can't have them as something lofty that we put on a scroll or something like that and don't see them in our daily lives. If we can't say what we know in a different way every time we say it, we probably really don't know it. All right. Now we're ready to get at a new basic principle. And this principle is also based on dualism in knowledge and creation. It has to do with difference and differentiation, and for all of the same reasons we've just mentioned. In this case, there are many maxims and sayings that embody this principle. We're going to look at three of them. The first two are from New Testament scripture. The first is from St. John's Gospel, and the second is from St. Luke's Gospel. The first is completed in two separate passages from St. John's Gospel. In one passage, the biblical Christ says, "I am in the Father, and the Father is in me." In the other passage of St. John, Christ is speaking to his disciples and he says, I am in you and you are in me. The second saying that we're going to use, the one is from St. Luke's Gospel. And it says, the kingdom of heaven is within. The third statement or saying that we're going to talk about is very ancient, but I first encountered it many years ago when I used to read Rudolf Steiner because his statement of it was very excellent. And it goes something like this. To know yourself, look outward into the world. And to know the world, look inward into yourself. So to know yourself, look without. To know the without, look within. Obviously, the principle that we're going to talk about tonight is one that's so difficult and always makes me uneasy for my lack of understanding, is the within without principle. This principle is also based on the same basic internal division of unity in a creative moment or in a moment of knowledge, in a Gnostic moment. Now, when we try to understand the within without principle, we have to deal with logic and grammar and their inadequacy for pointing at things that go beyond language, that are paralinguistic. Last time we spoke, I mentioned my love affair with the preposition, because the preposition is one of those things that if there is a statement with key prepositions in it, that statement is capable of several meanings. And some people who are insecure and who are looking for just one meaning, they find that rather maddening. And they usually exclude all the meanings but the one that is most doctrinaire to their belief system. If we're real spiritual students and we're seeking for the truth, we understand that the truth has many sides to it. If we just look at how multifarious the whole universe is that we are in, and if that all comes from one single unity, that one single unity must have all kinds of different sides to itself. And language, it really isn't so bad. It has its subtleties, and it's useful, and it even does pretty good with multiple meanings. And the preposition is very good in that way. However, adverbs and sometimes even adjectives have the property that they can show several meanings at the same time. They're pretty flexible. The words within and without are pretty special in our English language because they are prepositions, and they can be used as adjectives, and they can be used as adverbs, and if we use the definite article, they even function as nouns. So they're pretty interesting. When we talk about the within, we're talking about something in a noun state. We're talking about a within without principle that is very deep, it's very difficult, and it's very subtle to understand. Part of the reason for the lack of understanding of the principle is not necessarily because of the depth and the difficulty or even the subtlety. Part of the difficulty with understanding withinness or withoutness is because we have this very bad habit. The very bad habit we call materialism. Almost all of us are fixated materialists. And it seems to be a tough habit to break. Our spiritual progress goes much further once we drop the bad habit of materialistic thinking. Now, we don't have a sufficient time to go into a side trip about the nature of matter, because we'll do that eventually, but that's a very big topic. For now, let's just give a stopgap pseudo-definition of matter. It's a catch-all definition. Matter is the stuff which fills the co-potential we call space. Matter is the stuff that fills the co-potential we call space. With our senses, we perceive physical matter. And because so much of our waking consciousness, when we are as fully awake as we can now be at this stage of evolution, is spent in matter, and our waking consciousness is so limited, and we spend so much of our time looking out into what we call reality, we have gotten fixated in a materialistic view of the universe. So we make statements like, the cow is within the pasture. Fairly the kind of statement that we make. By this we mean that the cow is a thing that is made of stuff within a space that is its own space that we call its body, and it is within a fenced-in area that we call a pasture. Pretty simple stuff. I can talk about things like this. I can be confident about cows and pastures. Getting to more difficult things is not so easy. Now, we could get pedantic and technical about it, and we could say that the pasture itself is filled with stuff that we call air. That's getting a little bit silly. We understand what we mean when we make the statement that the cow is within the pasture. The usage is very simple, and it's pragmatic, especially if you have to take care of cows, but it's also materialistic. We use it all the time, and it works. It's reliable. In fact, we use it so much that it is habitual for us to think of the meaning of within as the meaning of within instead of a meaning of within. And that's a bad habit, which is a consequence of our being stuck in matter as we are, and we cling to it with insecurity. We've lost our spiritual vision, and we are in exile here in the material world, and all we see is what we see, and we hang on to it for dear life. So it's not surprising that we come up with this bad habit. But let's try to break that death grip a little bit, and let's try to do it bit by bit. Now, when we just said the cow is within the pasture, that wasn't a completely materialistic statement. It was quasi-materialistic. Because we weren't all out in the country looking at a cow in a pasture. That would have been truly materialistic, and that would have been appropriate. That kind of materialism is not bad. However, when I said that, maybe some of you formed an image inside of yourself of a cow in a pasture. And that image, or that process of making that image, would be sort of quasi-materialistic. It would be an inner image of something that was or could be supposedly outer, and that it would be a physical material object. That also would not really be objectionable if we knew that that is what we were doing and we were watching ourselves. But if we begin to think that that is the only way of looking at things, and that the entire cosmos is only that, that is inappropriate materialism. You'd be surprised how common it is. All you have to do is go to an astronomy website or something like that, and they think space is empty. And all those stars and planets and everything out there are being wasted because they think reality is only materialistic or material reality. Now, when people have these kinds of views, it isn't because of some kind of malicious intention. It's because most people don't have a memory of when we did know, or when we did see, even if it was an involuntary seeing. If there is a fault in humanity, the fault in humanity is not trying to believe that there's something more, that there's something else. I have tried, and I've tried for quite a few years, and I've had only very modest success, but enough to know that there is something within, that there is something beyond the visible, the sensory experience. This is not an easy thing to do, to let go of materialism and to see something of another reality. If it were an easy thing to do, there would be all kinds of seers all over the place. There are plenty of pretenders, but very few that have an objective apperception of spiritual worlds. In order to do that, beside letting go of our materialistic conception of things, we also have to evolve new faculties. We have to evolve a seership. That's not something that's easy to do. Things that happen on an evolutionary scale are things that happen very, very slowly. But most of all, we have to realize that we are capable of what we know now, or what we think we know now. And the big thing is, we have to have faith such that if we let go of our concept of the cosmos as it is now, it isn't going to vanish. And we aren't going to lose everything that we have. We have to have that much faith in what is within us. And that too is not an easy thing. I'm a Scorpio, I have the sun in Scorpio, and Scorpios are prone to looking for invisibles. I'm, a Taurus has a really hard time letting go and turning in. But there have been times when I have let go and encountered terror in myself. So you have to find faith. The fallacy of the materialistic conception of within is obvious if we try to apply it to the sayings that we are using. A materialistic view of the words of the biblical Christ, I am in you and you are in me, is obvious. this automatically rules out that the human physical form of Jesus and the spiritual being of Christ are the same thing. No two physical bodies can occupy the same space at the same time. Now, some people who are near materialists, they fancy themselves as being religion, talk about the breath of life, and they take that literally as a physical materialistic air, as inspiration or transpiration or inspiration. But if you have a pulmonary Christ, that's also a little silly. It isn't that we're breathing in Christ, having it within us, or something of that nature. So the materialistic conception of within, we can see immediately, does not work for spiritual things. Doesn't even work really well for reality. If we break an egg open to see what's within, all we do is see a new without. Only the new without has a yolk and all of that. It's not really within, it's a new without. Now, to be fair, there are a lot of Christians who have the quasi-materialistic Savior. That is, they have an image of a Savior inside of themselves to whom they speak, even though it's a physical material image, and they get intuitive responses within. And while that might be quasi-materialistic, it is a step forward. It's a step forward from all reality having to be empirical or it isn't reality. And it is by taking those kinds of steps forward that people are going to come to understandings. What we are looking for is experience. That's what mysticism is all about. It's about spiritual experience. Now, I believe that probably everyone in this room has experienced a non-materialistic withinness. I can remember one of the first times I ever experienced it. It wasn't profound, but it was clear. It was sometime after I quit smoking, and I was waiting for someone, and I watched somebody light up a cigarette and take a deep drag off of that cigarette. Within myself, I experienced the desire and the satisfaction of that desire that the other person had. It was completely within. It was as if it was my own, but I knew it wasn't my own. It's the kind of thing that some people call a contact high or something like that. So what we're talking about, I'm sure all of us have had this experience. Sometimes it's empathetic with somebody who's suffering, or somehow there is something that is not communicated physically, but within yourself you understand or you experience what the other person is experiencing within themselves, exactly as they are experiencing it. And at the same time, you're watching it. Now that is a non-materialistic withinness experience. It was obvious that it wasn't my own desire, but I realized that that desire could have motivated me to a similar end. Doesn't make any difference where it originates from. It could have been any one of those. Now the person who was having that experience, if you want to call it that, knew that experience and knew those desires were not my own. It's very important to know yourself. So, the kingdom of God is within. And even though this is a very profane example, it is an example of a mystical experience, of a deep mystical principle that can be experienced on deeper and deeper and deeper levels. Important. Now, people who are desire world clairvoyants, who have learned to apperceive feelings, emotions, motivations, desires, claim to have a kind of perception that is like this. We're not talking about something that just happens to people the way it happened to me. We're talking about a controlled inner faculty. When a clairvoyant has eyes closed, they can see emotions and feelings and such. And they experience them as emotions and feelings within themselves, and that they are experienced in the same way as one experiences a feeling when seeing a color with the senses. So that desire world clairvoyance is called color vision. It's not important the color is basically the form. What is important is that the feeling that one has when that color is seen is what the meaning is. Now, the same desire world clairvoyance, or a person having a desire world experience with eyes open, reports seeing the same bursts and shapes of color as with eyes closed. But they are obviously in a different space. They're in the same area as the person is. If you're seeing an aura or something like that, they're in the same area, but they're not in the same stuff as this. It is an inner dimensionality. And so here we are again, coming to that whole idea of within. In order to experience another world, such as the desire world or the world of thought or something like that, one must have a conception of time and space that is different than the three-dimensional space that we have now and the time that we have that is based on the moving of objects through three-dimensional space. So we can see from these simple examples, which probably every person has had, we can see that there is a within and a without, and that even the withoutness of the next higher dimension is inner. What is really important in all of this is to realize that we can experience something that in the material world, or the physical world as we consider it, is apart from ourselves, that we can experience it within ourselves the way it is experienced by another being. And that's very important, because that is the way we come to spiritual knowledge. More or less, we read the mind of God. Also, we can see the without of something as being a matter of form. And the form is expressive of the meaning. The color of somebody, suppose somebody is leaping into action on something and they have a brilliant red appearing aura around them. The redness is an expression of the desire to motivate to action. The redness is the form and the inner meaning, but there is something between the external form and the internal meaning. Even the person that I saw that was lighting up a cigarette and taking a drag was having physical expressions on her face, and those physical expressions on the face represented what was taking place inside. So the form expresses the inner meaning, but the inner meaning is experienced within. It wasn't a matter that I knew that this person was satisfying a desire because I saw the expression on the face. It was because I experienced it myself, what that person was experiencing inside of themselves. So, what we're saying is that the within of something is the realm of life and meaning, whereas the without of something is the form, or the finalization, or the expression of it. Now, these are superficial examples, but they can lead us on. If we just follow these things when they happen to us, they can lead us on. The kingdom of God is within. But when we hear that statement, the kingdom of God, we're talking about the spirit of spirit. We're talking about pure life and pure meaning that transcend even thoughts and ideas. So the level that we've been looking at, the principle of withinness, on that level is really been rather shallow. Now, it's possible to approach the withinness in the co-potential of space directly. One of the people who attends this class, but who is not here tonight, is doing just that. This person is following exercises that are something like a mathematical nature, but not quite, that open one to perceiving the fourth dimension. And one can only get as far as the ethers with such exercises, but it is something that takes you away from only the physical world. And when you made that first step, that you get beyond the physical, even only as far as etheric perception in a fourth dimensional space of things coming into or going out of existence in three-dimensional space, that's a big step, because once you do that, you realize that you can go further and further and further, and there are more things that you can do. Now, a few minutes ago, we had this rough definition of matter. And we said that matter was the stuff that fills the potential we call space. We could have enlarged on that definition, and we eventually will enlarge on that definition, and that's a threat. But by saying that there are other kinds of matter than just physical matter, and that is true, because in higher dimensional space, people relate to different kinds of matter. When the clairvoyant is seeing the man leaping into action with a burst of red around that person, they're seeing matter that is not matter of this stuff. So that if somebody tells you that they have a camera that can photograph auras and things like that, that's baloney. They may be able to focus a little bit on energy, either through infrared light or sometimes even ultraviolet light, but that's not the world of desire. That's a totally different world altogether. Now, we could have also enlarged on our definition of matter by defining what happens in the co-potential time. We'll try to do that now, but in doing that, it's a much more difficult thing to do. And so the definition that we come up with is going to be a bit ragged compared to understanding reality. Once again, one of the main reasons is because our conceptology is so materialistic that we don't see things in any other way. All right. A parallel or a symmetric definition would be something like spirit is the essence of what pervades time. So in the same way, matter is the stuff that pervades, that fills space. Spirit is the essence that pervades time. Of course, this kind of a definition always brings up all sorts of questions, such as, what is essence? Or what does pervade mean? And these questions get us right to the heart of the difficulty. The things of the spirit must be experienced, just as things of matter must be experienced if we're going to know them. But the means of experience is very different. Here, in the physical world, we have senses for experiencing physical matter. We're developing something parallel to senses for perceiving other kinds of matter, such as we're developing areas of vision for desire stuff and areas of vision for thought stuff. But we have no senses for spirit. This is because spirit is apperceived or experienced differently. Spirit is experienced directly. It is experienced directly as it is. And the further we get away from spirit, the more indirect things are. Our senses are a perfect example. There is no proof that we see reality with our senses. Light, according to physics, bounces off of people's bodies. That light gets focused through the eye into the retina, and it then becomes a chemical impulse, and the chemical impulse is reproduced in a fashion inside the brain. And perception is a learned process. So when it comes to perception, it's very indirect. Even if we touch somebody, that's very indirect because it's still going through nerves and being again assembled in the brain, and it's a tribute that we have much from sensory experience at all. It's a tribute to the power of the spirit to draw that much information from what is a very indirect process. In matter, we understand form and texture and things like that. In spirit, spirit is the creative source of everything. It's the source of meaning. Thus, when we experience spirit, there is about that experience a quality of self-evidence. There's always been doubt about sensory about sensory knowledge, but there is no doubt about spiritual experience because it's self-evident. And this is something we've all experienced. Intuition. We have an intuition that something is true, and when we learn to recognize what is a true intuition and what is something else coming from somewhere else in our psychology, when we recognize a true intuition, it's never wrong. And no one can unseat us from that. If a mathematician has gone through a very long theorem of proof that is several pages long, and now some of them are 40 pages long, and they come to the conclusion at the end, and they say, this is intuitively and self-evidently true. That's the real development of intuition. So what we're saying that if we go deeper and deeper into spirit, we go deeper and deeper into unity, and we come more and more to a singularity about the nature of reality. Now, much more could be said about that, but we're not going to do that now. This is enough to give the basic idea of the essence of experience or of spirit in time. There is something that we know, when we intuitively know someone, we know them. We don't have to have mannerisms. We don't have to hear the way they put their words together. We know them as they are. This is what we can get from the deepest level of intuition. Each person has a flavor. It has an essence that is all of its own, or each spirit has an essence. I don't like to use the word person in that usage there, but okay. So what we're saying is, it appears to be that the more one goes into the realms of matter, the more things are without. And that the more one proceeds with one's consciousness inward towards spirit, the more things are increasingly inward. We've even noted that, as far as we're concerned, the physical world is the end of the line. It's as far as we can carry things. We've carried them out to their final end, and then the experience comes trailing back to us from the memory of the experience.
Did I misunderstand you then earlier when you said that as you go farther within, you hit the without of the next?
No, they misunderstood. As you go within, you can experience the within of someone that appears to be without.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
I won't hold up the class.
Okay. Similarly, in the way that we experience that we can't carry anything further than the physical world in the outward direction, very deep and profound mystics have stated that when you get to the realms of pure spirit, realms that are even beyond the conception of self or any other conception or any other idea, everything is within. Now you understand why I'm uneasy about speaking about something like this, because it's it's such a far-fetched notion of everything. So, if we're trying to understand withinness by looking into space, we can make some progress with that, but basically we're going against the tide. If we want to understand withinness, we want to turn inwardly, and we want to look at in the other co-potential. We want to experience more in time if we want to understand withinness. Let's talk about some other sayings in order to get at this. There is a spiritual saying that says, "In God we live and move and have our being." In God we live and move and have our being. And there's that other saying that we've mentioned several times that is not one of our principles, but we've said that God is closer than hands and feet, meaning to say that the presence of unity, the presence of the universal spirit, is immediate. When we put these two things together, we have a little bit of a sense of mystic reality. Spiritual things that we get in mystical experiences are not foreign to us. They are something that are in us, and we are of them. All we have to do is recognize the higher states of spiritual being as they are manifest in us, sometimes even in our mundane lives, and if we sink ourselves into them, then we can have a full-blown spiritual experience. This is why we do exercises, concentration exercises, visualization exercises, thinking things through, things to purge our soul of things that overbear us. We do these exercises so that we can actually experience spiritual reality. We don't just do the exercise for the sake of exercise, we do them to experience reality. Therefore, since spiritual things are not foreign to us, we should be able to find examples of withinness in the co-potential of time within our own lives, our daily lives. Now, I'm an avid but not accomplished gardener. But I can look at a plot that I've been working on and I can say that within 2 months, this plot is going to be filled with lush greens. Now, one could say that that's a material process carried out in material forms. But it is also a process that is carried out within time. And if we look at that process of the becoming of a lush green garden, it is an intent to life expressed in time. It isn't only to present the form, it is an intent to life. Life that is expressed within time. Now, in the dense physical world, time cannot be separated from space. They're co-potentials. That's what it means for them to be co-potentials. Though, here we know that space and matter predominate. Similarly, if we want to know spirit in time, the further inward, the further within we go into the realms of spirit, the more the time predominates. Now, time is an extremely subtle potential. Space will take any form we give to it. Time is very subtle. Now, let's look at an experience in time. Suppose we go to a symphony and we hear the whole symphony through. Now that takes place in time, but what it is an unfoldment of a statement of truth and beauty in time. One is carried along by the thoughts and the emotions of the composer and of the musicians carrying it out. But the experience, even though there's sound outside, the experience of the music is really important inside of yourself. If it isn't, we say, I can't relate to that kind of music. Meaning to say that we can't find that in our own being. Now, for some people, the time is so stretched that it seems to be non-existent. For example, Wolfgang Mozart could hear an entire symphony in the flash of a second. And he could hear the whole business of it all as one thing. That is a deeply concentrated consciousness in a moment or in an instant. And it turns out that the more deeply concentrated we are in things, the more time is stretched and the more time seems to slow down until we reach that point where in spirit it seems as if everything is present all at once. That's an inward experience. So the garden plot and the symphony are expressions of spiritual intent in time. Now, take away the orchestra. We've all gone through periods of transformation, some of them only a few seconds long, some of them several years long, where there was no orchestra, but within ourselves there was a metamorphic process that went on, that we resolved our consciousness through a chain of thoughts and feelings or whatever, so that we became different people as a result of that metamorphosis. Something like that is like the symphony without the orchestra, without the music. It's just the experience of thoughts and feelings within ourselves, within time. Didn't make any difference whether it was a few seconds that the transformation took place in us or it was a few years. What was important is that we became something different, and it was important for us to be what we became. We've all had that experience. See, this is a rather frustrating class. We're trying to talk about deep and holy spiritual things, and we're talking about something that everybody else has had. Now take away the thoughts and the feelings. Now you have the idea that was behind the transformation. You didn't even need a thought. All you had was the intent, the original creative intent. Sort of like it's all invisible. The triangle that we draw on the board is not the triangle that is the idea of a triangle, which can never be seen. So, by proceeding within and gradually throwing off things from the rough husks of our experience, we come to understand an intent and a purpose that is behind everything. Every one of us has an indubitable idea, a feeling that something is supposed to be, and it can't not be. We have compulsions that are like that, but they're from a much more shallow part of our being than the divine purpose. So all of us have probably experienced this in one way or another. It is an experience that is within. It's an experience that's most frequently found in creative moments, if we're doing something creative. Probably all of us have had or understood something that came from so deep within us that it didn't seem like it was even us, that it seemed like it was beyond us. I think it was Beethoven that said there's something about every act of creation that's, I forget how it goes, but that it isn't a personal thing at all. And this is just exactly what you would expect. If something transcends even self and you have the pure creative love, the pure creative intent, the pure creative will to things, it cannot be a personal thing. And even when it does come through our selfhood, Most of us don't even recognize what our true self is. We think of ourselves and our personality and the images that we have of ourselves and all those sorts of things, and not the real thing itself. So this brings us now to our last saying that we have for a few minutes to look at. Well, it's going to be, the timing is going to work out all right. To know yourself, look without, and to understand the without, look within yourself. From what we've just said in the past few minutes, it's obvious that form finalizes creative intent, at least as far as humans are concerned, and that the meaning of form is within all the way back to the creative intent. So what we're talking about with the within without principle is a really important principle. It's a very big thing. We'll return to it from time to time, God willing, and we'll look at it in different ways. Now, to a large extent, we do not know ourselves. In some even trivial ways, those around us know things about us that we don't ourselves know. And it's important that we know ourselves. In some ways, it's one of our primary responsibilities in life is to know ourselves. We can't possibly hope to help others unless we know what we can and cannot do. So it's a good exercise, very simple exercise, not even particularly spiritual for most people, to sit down with a pencil and paper and a subject. Subject could be anything. It could be a tree, it could be a public opinion, it could be ice. It's usually good to begin with to have a very limited subject. Then you write. And you write about that subject. Maybe you describe it. Maybe you relate your own experiences with that object. Maybe you understand it for itself rather than from your own point of view. It's not meant to be formal writing, so grammar doesn't count and style doesn't count. And you can even put all kinds of personal feelings in if you want to. It isn't intended to be science, and it isn't intended to be art. So you don't have to worry about whether it's deep or whether it's shallow. It's just pure self-expression. If you've ever done that, you're sometimes astounded at what comes out. There are things that you knew that you never knew that you knew because you had never put them together. And all of it is autobiographical. All of it is an expression of you. That's why you try not to be too formal, but just express. And this is an excellent way to coordinate the within with the without. A converse exercise works just as well. And that is to take something from the external world and see what it suggests to you. No writing, but just in yourself, what comes up when you look at this, or what comes up when you look at that, especially if you're asking questions about the object of your attention. Why is the beetle's leg curved the way it is curved, for example? Or, what does that person's facial expression mean? By doing this, you learn to find the meaning of something outside of yourself within yourself. The same way that I saw the person light up a cigarette and felt what they were feeling, you can do this with anything and everything. To know the without, you look within, because the without is within yourself. And to know yourself, you express to the without. This is a process that's happening all the time. It happens in our everyday life, and that's as it's supposed to be. Our everyday life isn't just making so many bucks per year or anything like that. We're here learning all kinds of lessons, and we have a few carrots on a stick before us to keep us moving forward, but we're really here learning experiences of existence. And so spiritual exercises are not something that take us away from everyday life. They are something that improve our living in everyday life. It's a process that we use all the time, and it works whether we realize it or not. I have to meet a lot of new people. And when I meet a lot of new people, I start talking to them. You know what I find out? I find out, I get an approximate idea of what their intelligence is according to what comes out of me. It's as if that something in me is adjusting to what they are. And you know, sometimes it's quite surprising. You start talking with somebody and deep, heavy things start coming out of yourself, and then you realize, wow, this is a person that that gets it. They know all of that. So this is this is something that we do every day. Of course, you have to be careful of this process, because we as human beings are capable of contaminating anything. Even the most beautiful spiritual principles we can contaminate. Thus, for example, if I'm meeting what happens to be a very desirable woman, and I start finding all sorts of things coming out of me, they may not be because the woman is profound. It may be that I'm preening, or that I am trying to show something to impress this person because of a personal desire. You know, we can contaminate these things, and we might say that we're doing one thing, but if we really are honest with ourselves, we find out it's something different. This is why knowing ourselves and purifying our knowledge of ourselves is so important. Psychologists, and especially psychiatrists, can tell you that the within, without is a very much contaminated thing. There is the whole process of projection. That if there's something in ourselves that we're not admitting to ourselves, and that is sinful or unkind or something like that, and we don't want to admit it to ourselves, we project it and we see it in the other person. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it isn't there. But the whole matter is that in this process or in this activity, we have contaminated the within, without principle. And therefore we have to correct ourselves in all of that. So, we can see that as seekers, the place to begin, even if we want to understand about the spiritual worlds, is within. And if we want to understand what is within ourselves, we see what do we note in the external world around us, or what do we put out into the external world around us. So it's a very important thing that we come to an exact or a very clear, pure knowledge of ourselves. In some of the Greek mystery schools, they actually chiseled into stone these words. I'm sure you're familiar with them. No fe se auton. Know thyself. That's all we got for tonight.
May I return?
Yep.
Okay. It was when you were talking about, you have an egg and you crack it and you go within and you hit another without.
Yeah, you're looking to see, understand what is within, but all you see is another without. You're seeing a different surface.
Right. And
That's not the same thing as seeing the within of the egg. Like, for example, if somebody sees that egg with etheric vision, they see every molecule and every atom all the way through at the same time.
okay, so it's not a step-by-step process. It's
That's right.
okay.
Yeah, it's just it was just meant to be a comment about how exaggeratedly external we are about things, and how our understanding really doesn't penetrate very far, at least the way we try to exercise it.
Now, you experienced exactly what that person was experiencing without going through it because you had previously experienced it. Correct?
Not necessarily. This is what has a lot of people who are clairvoyants and who have this faculty at will, they have to shake their head often because they can experience what the other person's experiencing, and they have no idea why they'd ever want to do that. You know, humans, we as humans get into some awfully strange corners.
So it's not necessary to have to experience things in order to
correct.
empathize with
Yes.
and to feel.
Yes.
Good, because I didn't want to experience everything.
That's the, well, you hit right on, so that's the value of clairvoyance. Because then you can experience many things, and you can experience them much better without having to go through all of the sorrows and pains and the mistakes that we are prone to making. Ela says, I still don't know what within means.